Welcome everyone to today's long-form narrative feature. Before we dive deep into the full cinematic story, here is a quick look at what is in store for you. When 35-year-old insurance claims investigator Chloe Owen attends her family's corporate celebration, her father publicly disinherits her, stripping her of her legacy and openly mocking her right to use the family name. But the very next morning, an unexpected visitor arrives at her door with a 35-year-old hospital bracelet that shatters the foundation of everything she believed about her past. What follows is a slow-burn mystery of hidden truths, buried love, and the quiet exposure of a family built on decades of deceit. Now sit back, relax, and let's begin the story. My father raised his glass in front of 80 guests and set it directly against the microphone. My daughter Brianna inherits the company, all $230 million. He paused, looking straight at me from across the country club ballroom. Chloe, you're lucky I still let you use the name. Most men would have cut it years ago. My mother laughed. It wasn't a small, tentative laugh. It was a bright, practiced, carrying laugh that echoed across the room like she had waited 35 years to finally make that sound. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I simply set my glass down on the tablecloth, took my coat from the rack, and walked out while 80 people watched the unloved daughter leave her own family's celebration. The next morning, a lawyer stood at my apartment door holding a 35-year-old hospital bracelet sealed in clear plastic. My name wasn't written on it. He looked at me and said only one sentence. That's why we're here. My family thought that night in the ballroom erased me. They had no idea what that tiny plastic band was about to erase instead. My name is Chloe Owen. I am 35 years old. If you've ever been told you were lucky just to keep a name that never wanted you, drop a comment below and subscribe. And while you're down there, leave your city and local time. I read every single one. This is the story of the night my family erased me, and the piece of plastic that unraveled their entire narrative. It really starts 25 years ago with a report card on a refrigerator. I was 10 years old. It was a Tuesday. Mrs. Pell always sent report cards home in sealed brown envelopes on Tuesdays. I carried mine on the bus ride home like it was crafted from fragile glass. Straight A's down every single column. I remember practicing in my head how I would casually hand it to my father, because in our house, begging for praise was considered worse than failing. Brianna beat me to the kitchen. She was 7, carrying a report card with a B+ in one subject. My father held her card up to the light, as if it were a high-value stock certificate. He read every teacher comment out loud, repeating the word effort 3 times. Then he picked up mine, glanced down the column of A's the way you glance at a store receipt you already know is correct, and set it on the counter next to the junk mail. Don't fish for praise, Chloe, he said without looking up. It's unbecoming. That night, Brianna's report card went up on the refrigerator under a lighthouse magnet. Mine went into the kitchen drawer with the takeout menus. My mother stood in the doorway drying her hands on a towel. She saw everything and said nothing, which I would eventually realize was her native tongue. It would be easy to describe my childhood as a simple list of grievances, but that isn't the point. The point is what that kitchen taught me. It taught me that in the Owen household, affection was a display item reserved for someone else. It taught me to stop offering people things I couldn't afford to have ignored. And it taught me, a lesson that took 35 years to unlearn, that if I was just useful, careful, and quiet enough, there might eventually be room for me on that refrigerator. There never was, but the discipline proved valuable. Today, I am a senior large loss claims adjuster with 13 years at Hartwell Mutual in Columbus. When a pipe floods a house or a structure burns, I am the person who walks through the damage with a clipboard to establish what actually happened. People assume the work is about money. It's actually about stories. Everyone who files a claim tells a story, and my job is to find the exact point where the story and the physical evidence diverge. I photograph everything twice and keep copies of copies. My desk neighbor, Tessa, once noted. You read people like structural water damage. You always find where the leak started. I used to think I learned that in professional training, but I actually learned it in a house where the official story never matched the room I was standing in. Consider another example. When I turned 18, the college savings fund my grandmother helped establish quietly vanished. My father called it a financial restructuring. claiming the funds were reallocated for Brianna because she was at a critical developmental age. I enrolled at Ohio State, took out student loans, and worked 25 hours a week at a local coffee shop. During the fall of my sophomore year, I came up $4,800 short on tuition. I sat in a concrete stairwell rechecking the numbers repeatedly. 2 weeks later, the bursar's office informed me my balance had been cleared by the Buckeye Futures Hardship Fund. I had never applied for it. I mailed a thank you letter addressed to Dear Benefactor, to the P.O. box listed on the receipt, but no reply ever came. I cataloged it as a rare anonymous kindness, and filed it away in my memory. My memory drawer was fuller than I knew, containing details about my father's business partner, Neil Harmon. Everyone called him Uncle Neil, though he wasn't related to us. Neil was the quiet half of Harmon Owen Builders, the partner who double-checked the structural math while my father shook hands with clients. When I was 8, Neil taught me how to cast a fishing line off a dock during a company picnic. He steadied my wrist and remarked, "Some things you measure twice, kiddo, people included." When I was 12, he gave me a high-end engineering calculator, telling me I'd grow into it. Then around my 18th birthday, he simply stopped attending family events. His name remained on the company trucks and office doors, but he vanished from holiday dinners and graduations. I kept a photograph from that last picnic. Everyone is posing for the camera, while Neil is partially out of frame at the edge, looking directly into the lens as if he were observing us from the outside. In my family, you learned early not to ask about people who faded out of photos. For years, none of this felt like a secret. It just felt like normal family life. Then, last November, market rumors confirmed that Crestline National Group wanted to acquire Harmon Owen Builders for a reported $230 million. That figure represented the valuation of the entire enterprise: equipment, contracts, land, and brand identity. My father owned 52% of the shares, Neil Harmon held 40%, and the remaining 8% was divided among 3 longtime employees who had been there since the company was just 2 men and a truck. My father simply rounded all of it off and referred to it as my company. Brianna had been at the firm since 2019 as Director of Business Development, complete with a corner office and a company credit card. That winter, word circulated that my father needed to settle internal succession before finalizing the buyout. In March, a formal invitation arrived at my apartment for the 42nd anniversary dinner at the Falkbrook Country Club. My 35th birthday passed 9 days prior without a text or call from my parents or sister. The evening before the country club event, my mother phoned me. She skipped greetings and spoke in a tight, cautious tone. "We're something quiet tomorrow. Please don't make him angry." "Mom, it's a corporate dinner. What is there to be angry about?" I asked. After a long pause, she repeated, "Just quiet, Chloe, please," and hung up. She sounded genuinely afraid, though I didn't yet realize she wasn't afraid for herself. By 7 p.m. the next evening, the Falkbrook ballroom held 80 people. I observed the room systematically. Field supervisors near the bar, subcontractors near the windows, church friends at center tables, bank representatives near the podium, and longtime foreman Gus Weaver leaning against the back wall. My family occupied table 1 up front. I was assigned to table 11 near the kitchen doors, seated between a supplier's spouse and an empty seat. Seat placement is information. At table 3 sat Neil Harmon, whom I hadn't seen in nearly 17 years. He had aged significantly, his hair completely white, sitting motionless in a gray suit while an untouched glass of champagne flattened in front of him. Brianna approached my chair in a dark dress, squeezed my shoulder tightly and said, "Dad has a big announcement. Try to smile for once." She then walked to table 1 and whispered to my father, who nodded slowly. The background music stopped, and my father took the microphone. He spoke about founding the company in 1984, thanked the lenders, and used the word legacy 4 times. Then his tone hardened as he announced that a firm's true measure is succession. "My daughter Brianna inherits the company. $230 million, he stated clearly. Then he locked eyes with me at table 11. "Chloe, you're lucky I still let you use the name. Most men would have cut it years ago." My mother delivered her sharp, practiced laugh half a beat before the rest of the room could process the statement. The audience reacted with visible discomfort. Bank officers looked away, Church acquaintances stared at centerpieces, and Gus Weaver set his drink down with deliberate force. At table 3, Neil Harmon gripped his chair back, his knuckles turning white as he partially stood, then slowly sank back down, staring at the floor. I maintained absolute composure, applied my professional protocol, document, preserve, exit, and stood up. I left my napkin on the chair, retrieved my coat, and walked straight out of the ballroom at an even pace, leaving my untouched dessert behind. At 11:40 p.m. that night, my phone lit up with an unsaved local number. It rang once, a fraction of a second, and stopped. No voicemail was left. At 9 a.m. on Sunday, a sharp double knock sounded at my door. Through the peephole, I saw an older man in a charcoal coat carrying a worn leather briefcase. I opened the door on the security chain. "Ms. Owen, my name is Martin Hale. I'm an attorney," he said, holding his business card up to the opening. The card read Hale and Croft, Estates, Trusts, and Succession Planning. "I'm not here about last night. I'm here about a night 35 years ago." I unlatched the chain, asked for a moment, and verified his credentials on the State Bar website. Clean record, licensed since 1993. I let him in. At my kitchen table, Mr. Hale opened his briefcase and produced a single sealed plastic sleeve, containing a discolored hospital identification wristband. I read the typed text through the plastic. "Baby girl Calloway, March 12, 1991. March 12, 1991, is my birthday. Calloway is my mother's maiden name. A name she officially stopped using 2 years before my birth. Furthermore, the band was sized for an adult wrist, not an infant's. Hospitals at the time used matching 3-band systems: mother, infant, and designated support person. That's why we're here," Hale stated quietly. He explained that his client had kept the band for 35 years and requested a meeting, though he was not yet authorized to disclose the client's identity. "I don't accept meetings with anonymous individuals regarding my birth," I replied. "Hale notet. My client was at the hospital before your father arrived." I disputed the claim, noting that my mother went into early labor while visiting my grandmother in West Virginia, and my father drove through the night to get there. "Because last night, Ms. Owen, my client ran out of reasons to wait," Hale added, referencing the events at the country club. He left the sealed sleeve on my table, noted that a standard birth certificate wouldn't reveal the true father, due to legal marital presumptions, and departed. I created an investigation file labeled Co-Origin. By noon, I learned that Camden Valley Medical Center in Parkersburg, West Virginia had closed in 2011, transferring its physical records to county archives. I called my mother, asking casually which hospital I was born in for a routine workplace form. After a distinct 2-second pause, she recited the standard family narrative. "Early labor, mountain snow, my father driving overnight." She then added, "Your father expects an apology, Chloe," and hung up. At 9:52 p.m., Brianna texted, "Whatever you're digging for, stop embarrassing the family." I had told no one about my query except my mother. On Thursday, I drove 3 hours to Parkersburg. At the county records office, an archivist located the March 1991 hospital records. The admission log confirmed, "Patient, Calloway Janet. Admitted, March 11, 1991. The emergency contact listed her mother, L. Calloway, with no mention of Raymond Owen. Crucially, the payment field read, self-paid/cash in full. My father's firm had comprehensive group health insurance at the time. Paying cash under a maiden name eliminated insurance claim traces. Next, I examined the visitor ledger for March 12, 1991. Midway down the page, an entry read, N. Harmon family, band number 0114, in 9:14 p.m. The exit time was blank. The band number matched the adult wristband sitting on my kitchen table. I called Martin Hale from the parking lot and said, "Tell your client I know his name." Hale paused before responding. "He would like you to come to Seneca Lake." The next morning, I drove 90 minutes east to Seneca Lake. I reached a brown cabin overlooking the water. Neil Harmon opened the door. He appeared frail and noticeably ill, but what caught my attention immediately was his eyes. The exact gray-green shade as mine, complete with the same slight tilt at the outer corners. "Hi, kiddo," he said softly. My prepared questions faltered, turning into, "How long have you known?" "Since before you did," he answered, leading me out to a deck with 2 Adirondack chairs, one heavily weathered, the other relatively new and unused. He sat in the weathered chair and began explaining. In the spring of 1990, the company was struggling, prompting my father to take an 11-month project management contract in Anchorage, Alaska. Neil stayed behind to manage Columbus operations and assist my mother with household emergencies. "It was one night in mid-June," Neil said. "We were 2 lonely people being careless. We ended it immediately afterward. My mother discovered she was pregnant that autumn, calculating that the dates could plausibly align with my father's brief visit home in July if everyone maintained the story. In February, she moved to Parkersburg under the premise of assisting her mother. When labor began unexpectedly on March 11th, she called Neil because he already knew the truth. Neil drove 3 hours, checked in as family, and received the matching wristband. "I held you for 6 minutes while your mother slept," Neil revealed. "Then the nurse returned you to the nursery and cut the band off my wrist per protocol. I asked to keep it. It was the only thing of yours I was ever permitted to hold." When I asked why he abandoned me, Neil pulled out a wooden tray containing items from over the years. 2 unused tickets to my 2013 college graduation, bank records confirming he personally funded the $4,800 hardship grant for my tuition, and the thank you letter I had mailed to the P.O. Box 16 years prior. What arithmetic made watching from a distance better than being present? I asked, my voice rising. "The kind that made a promise," Neil replied. He explained that in 1996, he mailed a 5th birthday card to our house. My mother intercepted it and confronted him at his office, giving him an ultimatum: watch from a distance without making claims, or be cut off completely. Neil agreed to the terms, writing a birthday card every year thereafter without mailing them. Neil then experienced a bout of chest tightness. Retrieving medication from a nearby table, he disclosed that he had been diagnosed with congestive heart failure 2 years earlier. We agreed to proceed honestly and review the remaining details at a manageable pace. He requested that I refrain from confronting my father until I possessed full documentation. On Saturday, April 4th, I returned to the cabin. Neil was on the dock with fishing rods and a green tackle box labeled Chloe in faded marker, a box I had labeled at age 8. We spent the morning fishing while he shared background details about his early business partnership with my father. He mentioned that he had updated all his legal estate documents that week through hail. During our conversation, his phone lit up with incoming calls from Raymond Owen. "He needs my 40% share to finalize the Crestline buyout," Neil noted, turning the phone face down. On April 11th, Neil's office manager called to inform me that Neil had passed away quietly in his chair on the deck overlooking the lake. Shortly after, Brianna posted an old family photograph online with a tribute to Uncle Neil. In the photo, the framing had been altered, cropping me out entirely at the shoulder. At Neil's funeral the following Thursday, my father delivered the eulogy, referring to Neil as my brother and my conscience. From the back row, I saw my father's eyes sweep the room, pause briefly on me, and then continue his speech. The following Tuesday, I met with Martin Hale. He clarified that Neil had transferred his assets into a private living trust, avoiding probate court entirely. Hale read the trust terms aloud. Neil's 40% equity in Harmon Owen Builders, the lake house, and his personal property were bequeathed to my daughter, Chloe Calloway Owen. To protect the trust from legal challenges, Hale presented supporting evidence. Call logs showing Neil initiated the trust updates prior to my meeting with him, a cardiologist's certificate of mental competence, a video recording of the signing, and a matching draft trust from 2014. Hale handed me a small wooden box containing the wallet photo labeled 6 minutes, my original college thank you letter, and 35 sealed birthday cards spanning my entire life. That evening, my father left a harsh voicemail demanding that I sign over the shares to keep the matter private. The next day, Brianna invited me to coffee, offering a $2 million payout in exchange for waiving my claims, calling me a rounding error in this family. I recorded the conversation and declined the offer. Over the following days, family members began excluding me, eventually removing me from the extended family messaging group. Shortly after, My great-aunt Doris called to tell me about an incident at my grandmother's 2009 funeral, where an old neighbor publicly thanked Neil in front of my father for driving my mother to the hospital in 1991. That encounter coincided with the exact time frame my college fund was quietly revoked. I went to my parents' house to confront my mother directly. She was in the dining room, quietly folding laundry. I placed the hospital band on the table. She acknowledged intercepting the 1996 birthday card and confirming my research, explaining that she made compromises to maintain the family structure. Then she revealed a crucial detail. My father had deduced the timeline back in 1991 by counting the months himself, choosing to harbor resentment silently for decades rather than address it directly. His public toast at the country club was simply the final execution of a long-standing personal rejection. Over the next 2 weeks, Martin Hale and I prepared for the formal shareholders meeting scheduled for Friday, May 8th. I also met with Crestline's representatives to discuss corporate governance and operational stability following the transaction. On May 8th, 25 people assembled in the main boardroom at Harmon Owen Builders, including the executive team, legal counsel, minor shareholders, my parents, and Brianna. My father opened the proceedings by requesting that I sign a proxy agreement so the transaction could proceed without delay. I stood up and placed the sealed hospital wristband in the center of the conference table. I then presented the documented record: the Parkersburg Hospital admission form, the cash payment record, the emergency contact log, and the visitor ledger entry confirming Neil Harmon's presence on March 12, 1991. My father attempted to dismiss the evidence as fabricated. In response, Martin Hale distributed copies of Neil's notarized affidavit, medical clearance, and supporting documentation to every attendee. My mother then stood up and addressed my father directly. "Ray, enough. Everything on that page is true. I called Neil that night because you didn't come home." My father reacted angrily, striking the table and shouting, "I knew it. 35 years. I counted the months." His outburst inadvertently confirmed to the entire room, including the buyers and longtime staff, that his treatment of me had been a deliberate, decades-long retaliation. Foreman Gus Weaver immediately stood up and walked out of the room. I then presented my formal terms for the transaction. 1. My 40% equity share would be sold at full market value without family discounts. 2. The 8% equity held by minority staff members would be fully protected, with a 36-month employment guarantee for all current personnel written into the purchase agreement. 3. The corporate entity name, Harmon Owen, would remain unchanged on all assets and vehicles. 4. A trade school scholarship fund named after Neil Harmon would be established using a portion of my proceeds to assist students needing tuition support. 5. Raymond Owen must step down from management and retire at closing. Crestline's leadership agreed to the terms immediately. I signed the official documents using my full legal name, Chloe Calloway Owen. The sale concluded on May 28th. The minority shareholders received their payout, staff positions were preserved, and the firm retained its original name. My father received his equity distribution and retired from public business life, though the revelation severely damaged his local standing and personal reputation. Brianna later sent a brief message attempting to reconcile, but I opted not to engage, leaving the matter open for future consideration. A week after the closing, my mother mailed me the original 1996 birthday card she had kept hidden in her jewelry box for 30 years, along with a note acknowledging her past choices. We met briefly at a neutral location, where she shared one final detail. She had been awake in the hospital room during those 6 minutes in 1991, silently watching Neil hold me before he left. Finally, I drove out to the cabin at Seneca Lake. I placed the hospital band in a frame on the mantel alongside the original photograph. I opened the last birthday card from Neil, the 35th card dated March 12, 2026. Inside he had written, "You asked why I stayed away. Wrong question, kiddo. I never left, Dad." I walked out to the deck, sat down in the chair he had kept reserved for me overlooking the water, and looked out across the lake.